जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी कुंज बिहारी जय गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी गोपी जन जय गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी गोपी जन वल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रज जन रंजन यमुना तीरा वनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी एवं विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर श्री श्रीमद हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस श्री भक्तिवेदांत स्वामी महाराज श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य अष्टोत्तर हिज डिवाइन ग्रेस भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी महाराज श्रील प्रभुपाद की अनंत कोटि वैष्णववृंद की नामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवासादि गौर भक्तवृंद की श्री श्री राधा कृष्ण गोप गोपीनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरि गोवर्धन की वृंदावन धाम की नवदीप धाम की गंगा माई की यमुना माई की भक्ति देवी की तुलसी देवी की नाम संकीर्तन यज्ञ की all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to Shri Guru and Gauranga, all glories to you, Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. 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 Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudiraye Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavate Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naistiki. We're reading from Canto 5, chapter 19, verse number 10. Tam Bhagwan Narado Varnashrama Vatibhir Bharatibhi Prajabhir Bhagvat Proktabhyam Sankhya Yogyabhyam Bhagvat Anubhavopavarnanam Savarner Upadekshyamanah Parama Bhakti Bhaveno Pasarati Idam Chabi Granati. Word to word meanings. Tam, him. Narayan. Bhagwan, the most powerful saintly person. Narada, the great sage Narad. Varna Ashrama Vatibihi, by the followers of the institution of the four Varnas and four Ashramas. Bharatibihi, of the land known as Bharatvarsha, India. Prajabhi, who are the inhabitants. Bhagavad Proktabhyam, which was stated by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Sankhya, by the Sankhya Yoga system, the analytical study of material conditions. Yogyabhyam, by practice of the yoga system. Bhagavad Anubhav Upavarnanam, which describes the process of God realization. Savarne, unto Savarni Manu, Upadekshamanaha, instructing. Parama Bhakti Bhavena, in greatly ecstatic loving service to the Lord. Upasarati, serves the Lord. Idam, this. Cha, and. Abhigranati, chants. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Srila Prabhupada. Jai Srila Prabhupada. Translation. In his own book known as Narad Pancharatra, Bhagwan Narada has very vividly described how to work to achieve the ultimate goal of life, devotion, through knowledge and through execution of the mystic yoga system. He has also described the glories of the Lord, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The great sage Narada instructed the tenets of this transcendental literature to Savarni Manu in order to teach those inhabitants of Bharatvarsha who strictly follow the principles of Varnashrama Dharma how to achieve the devotional service of the Lord. Thus, Narad Muni, along with the other inhabitants of Bharatvarsha, always engages in the service of Nar Narayan, and he chants as follows. Purport. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has clearly declared, Bharat Bhumite Haila Manushya Janmayar Janma Sarthak Kari Kara Parapkar. The real success of fulfillment of the mission of human life can be achieved in India, Bharatvarsha. Because in Bharatvarsha, the purpose of life and the method for achieving success are evident. People should take advantage of the opportunity afforded by Bharatvarsha, and this is especially so for those who are following the principles of Varnashrama Dharma. If we do not take to the principles of Varnashrama Dharma by accepting the four social orders, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Shudra, and the four orders of spiritual life, Brahmachari, Grahastha, Vanaprastha, and Sannyas, there can be no question of success in life. Unfortunately, because of the influence of Kali Yuga, everything is now being lost. The inhabitants of Bharatvarsha are gradually becoming degraded Mlechas and Yavanas. How then will they teach others? Therefore, this Krishna consciousness movement has been started not only for the inhabitants of Bharatvarsha, but for all the people of the world, as announced by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There is still time, and if the inhabitants of Bharatvarsha take this movement of Krishna consciousness seriously, the entire world will be safe from gliding down to a hellish condition. The Krishna consciousness movement follows the process of Pancharatrika Vidhi and that of Bhagavad Vidhi simultaneously, so that people can take advantage of the movement and make their lives successful. Om Ajnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guroh Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamsha Shri Rupam Sagrajata Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakhanvitamsha Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashat Deshatarine Vancha Kalpatarobhisha Kripa Sindhu Bhevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namane Gaura Tushe Namaha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Mokam karoti vachalam pangam langayate girim yat kripatam maham vande Shri Gurun Dinatarina. Hare Krishna. So here in this series of prayers, as we were discussing, and the description of the islands of Jambudvip. So now here these series of prayers are the prayers chanted by Narad Muni, who is one of the chief inhabitants of this place, Bharatvarsha. And as we previously covered that how Nar Narayan Rishi, they are the predominating deities in this area. And these prayers that are chanted by Narad Muni, they are in glorification of Nar Narayan Rishi. And also as it's mentioned, Narad Muni instructed the tenets of this transcendental literature. That is the Narad Pancharatra. That is Pancharatrika Vidhi, or the different rules and regulations of deity worship we follow. So that also has been instructed to Savarni Manu in order to teach those inhabitants of Bharatvarsha who strictly follow the principles of Varnashrama Dharma how to achieve the devotional service of the Lord. So how Narad Muni we see is busy engaged in glorifying the Lord in this along with the inhabitants of this place. And also he gave some instructions, he gave these transcendental literatures, books to the Manu, who is the father of mankind, so that it can be promoted further on, or it can be spread to further also. So now here in this purport, Prabhupada gives a very nice purport where he says that, or he quotes this shloka from Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Bharat Bhumite Haila Manushya Janma Yar, Janma Sarthak Kari Karav Parapkar. And he speaks about the special advantage of taking birth in this Bharatvarsha. So till now we were discussing about different varshas. We discussed Elavrata Varsha and further different varshas. The standard of living in those varshas, the inhabitants in those varshas. And finally now we have come to the discussion of Bharatvarsha. Of course, we understand through the Vedic description that Bharatvarsha is a vast expanse of land. Prabhupada translates it to India, but Bharatvarsha we understand is the entire Varsha, which includes the entire place, not just India. But for ease of understanding, Prabhupada just says India. But the point that is made is, especially for those who have taken birth in Bharatvarsha, then they have or they can attain some higher standards, or they are very fortunate in the sense that they have got these teachings, or they have got these transcendental literatures which have been given by Narad Muni. And then he says people should take advantage of the opportunity afforded by the Bharatvarsha. And this is especially so for those who are following the principles of Varnashrama Dharma. So here Prabhupada is speaking, or here even in the translation we see something or importance is given on the Varnashrama Dharma. And of course on devotional service. But even to take up to devotional service here, as it's mentioned, that for those who are following the principles of Varnashrama Dharma, that they should take up to this opportunity. And Prabhupada writes further, he says, if we do not take to the principles of Varnashrama Dharma by accepting the full social orders and the 4 orders of spiritual life, there can be no question of success in life. Prabhupada directly writes that one who does not take to this Varnashrama Dharma, one who does not follow these 4 social orders and 4 spiritual orders, then for him to make any advancement, for him to actually understand the deeper truths of spiritual life is very difficult. And that's how he explains the importance of Varnashrama Dharma. So we see in this world, and then further he writes that because of the influence of Kali Yuga, everything is now being lost. So if we see in Prabhupada's also life, when he went to the West, when he started preaching, of course, initially he didn't speak much about Varnashrama Dharma. Initially he was just focused on giving them or bringing them to the track 3 devotional service, just performing full-time devotional service. But we see later on when he saw that most of the devotees were not able to keep with the standards and devotees were falling off from the movement, falling down from their positions. And then he started laying focus on this Varnashrama Dharma. Because this is like just like we say that the mode of goodness. We say that mode of goodness is, we are expected to go to transcendental mode. But even then the mode of goodness is a favorable platform. Where a person who is situated on that mode, then it will be easy for him to transcend that mode. Or at least first one has to come to mode of goodness. Same way when it comes to this Varnashrama Dharma or following these things, naturally it's very, very essential that the society gets divided in this way, and this is practiced so that at least the society becomes sinless. Because for a person who is sinful, because a person who is engaging in different kinds of sinful activities, for him to take up to devotional service or for him to be determined in the practice of devotional service becomes very, very difficult. And that's why this is always said, or Prabhupada always sometimes made this statement, that if even if 1% of the population of the entire world takes to this Varnashrama Dharma, taking to Varnashrama Dharma means first of all giving up the 4 regular, what we speak about, the 4 principles that have to be followed. First of all, giving those 4 sinful activities, following the 4 regulative principles, and coming in the tenets of Varnashrama Dharma. So Prabhupada used to say that even if 1% of the population takes to this, the entire face of the world can change. Because naturally, once this is followed, then it lays the higher ground for people to follow further, or people to advance further in spiritual life. So yesterday, as we were seeing, or yesterday we are hearing in the lecture which we are hearing from Prabhupada, how is mentioning that people in this world, they are also trying to solve the problems of this life or solve the problems of this world. They're also trying to do various techniques, various methods to solve these problems. Like the United Nations he spoke about, that how they create the United Nations so that all of the people can come together and stay happily, live together. But the only impact or only result is the flags are increasing, fights are increasing more and more. And then we were discussing how he has given the multiple names to United Nations. Somewhere he calls them as a pack of or a group of barking dogs. Somewhere yesterday he was calling them as thieves and rogues. Another lecture I was hearing, he called them as a group of cheaters or people who are just cheating the public. Because these things or these kind of solutions, creating the United Nations, doing all these things cannot lead to any solution. Ultimately, as Prabhupada used to say, people come to this standard, take to Krishna consciousness, start following, or at least even some percentage start following this Varnashrama Dharma. Or if the society is organized in a proper way, then the problems can be solved, then the actual problems can be solved. First of all, if people take to this, naturally the problems or material problems when it comes to hunger and all these different kinds of problems, naturally those will be taken care. Because the society will be divided in different classes, and they will maintain or they will engage in different activities based on their propensities. So naturally people will be satisfied, and when they are dharmic, naturally the grains or naturally rains will happen more, grains will come more, and naturally all other crises or other problems of material existence will get solved. And at the same time, people will be able to easily practice devotional service. So we read in the Narad Muni's teachings only, when Narad Muni is teaching to Puranjana. In the 4th canto, this description comes when Narad Muni goes to King Prachini Brahishad, and he gives the allegoric story of a personality called as Puranjana. So there also preaches something similar. There also is telling about that how people are stuck in this world in so many problems of life, and they are trying to solve one or the other problem, but they do not know what is the way to solve that. And he gives a very nice example. He gives the example that just like sometimes some person is carrying a load on his shoulder. Some person carries the load on his hand, and after some time when he is carrying, he gets tired. So now instead of thinking how to solve this problem, what he does to get relief, he puts the load on his one hand or one shoulder. And after some time he gets tired by that, he puts it on other shoulder. Just like when we carry book cartons and they are heavy, we put it on one shoulder and another shoulder. So the point is, people try to just solve these problems by moving it from one place to another, and in that they feel little comfort. But that is not the way the problems will get solved. Or through these things, or through just passing the load from one place to another, problems won't get solved. He even gives Prabhupada in that pastime, when Narad Muni is giving these teachings, Prabhupada gives a very nice contemporary example. He gives the example of these automobiles. That how initially these automobiles, they were manufactured, or the need was seen that people want to go swiftly from one place to another. Although Prabhupada used to say that this is not needed, but still in the West they saw this need and the automobiles were manufactured. And then things became quicker, or things became more swift. People were easily able to travel from one place to another or go from different places. And that was, they thought that one problem is solved, or one problem of transportation is sorted. But then he gives this example that how because of that one problem, how because of that one solution, so many other problems came into picture. There came the problem even 50 years before Prabhupada is giving this example, which we now see is highly relevant even in India. That he was telling this in the West, that how so many automobiles were there and then so many roads were constructed. And again, there was the example, or there was the problem of jams or congestions that was happening, pollution that was happening, and more and more misery or more and more problems ensued further. And then accidents, and no matter what to say, so many things. And that's what he explains. That's what he was seeing the situation 50 years ago in the West, and now we see the same situation even relevant all around. So the point is, the point that is made is through these temporary solutions or through material solutions, if people just keep on applying these solutions to solve the problems, it will only end up creating more and more further problems. And through these ways, these problems cannot be solved. And that's why this instruction of Narad Muni becomes very, very relevant, where he speaks about following the teachings of, as Prabhupada points to, following the principles of Varnashrama Dharma. Prabhupada also speaks about a class of people who are Arya Samajis. And he speaks about one thing, that these people also, they follow the Vedas, they follow some sections of the Vedas. But he speaks that they have also a flaw in them. Even though they call themselves as followers of the Vedic literature, but they focus on just one aspect of the Vedas, that is on the sacrificial portion of the Vedas. They talk about the sacrifices, they talk about those aspects, but they don't talk about the other aspects of the Vedic literatures. And especially Prabhupada says that they are just attracted to the glittering and the pleasing things in the Vedic literatures, basically the Karma Kanda section. But they don't speak about the goal of Vedic literatures, the goal of studying the entire Vedic literatures. And that's why they are also mistaken. And he gives many examples of the Smarta Brahmanas and all these personalities. that even though they understand the Vedic literatures, but they are also misguided. Because ultimately, all of these people are looking for sense gratification. And unless a person doesn't think about doing something selflessly for the pleasure of the Lord, or he's just engaged in sense gratification, then he cannot solve any problem, or then he cannot advance much in spiritual life. And here it's mentioned that how these problems or how these entire things can be mitigated just when society takes to this Varnashrama Dharma. So in the past, Acharyas explained that in the past it was the responsibility of the ruler who was there. It was the ruler's responsibility or the Kshatriya's responsibility to maintain the order in the society. And it was his duty to see that all the citizens of the society follow the Varnas in the ashramas. There's one example that is given that, well, Lord Ram, he had been sent for exile. So now when he came back to the kingdom, and Bharat Maharaj received him, and we know Bharat Maharaj was very great devotee of Lord Ram, he was waiting for Lord Ram to come back. But there also it's described, before taking over the kingdom or before taking the kingdom from Bharat Maharaj, Lord Ram also tested in multiple ways. First, before coming to Ayodhya, he sent Lakshman. He sent Lakshman just to check that how is Bharat Maharaj, or what is his mood. How is he ruling the kingdom? Just to see whether Bharat Maharaj feels or Bharat Maharaj has developed that pride of ruling the kingdom, or has he forgotten everything about Lord Ram, or he still worships or he still remembers Lord Ram. And another thing that Lord Ram wanted to test, that whether the citizens are following the Varnashrama Dharma or not, whether the citizens or Bharat Maharaj is making them properly follow the different aspects of the Varnas in the ashramas. When he saw that everything is happening perfectly, citizens are following the Varnashrama Dharma, the ruler himself, he is devotee of Bharat Maharaj himself, is respectable, himself is always thinking about Lord Ram, or always wanted Lord Ram to return. That was the time Ram came back and he took over the charge of the entire kingdom. So you see, so much stress was given on all these things. Or so much stress was given even for a ruler. This was his main duty, that was to organize the society in such way and allow all the citizens to do activities according to their propensities. It was his duty to take care of the Brahmanas, his duty to take care of the Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and the Shudras. And it was his duty that all of them are able to practice their own engagements without any fear or without any danger. Just like we see a similar example which comes even in the Mahabharata. When there was one person, a Brahmana, and it seems someone stole his cows. So Brahmanas, they used to keep the cows, they used to have the place, and they used to maintain the cows also sometimes. So one Brahmana, it seems someone stole his cows and he went directly to the king, or he went, that time they were ruling in Indraprastha, the Pandavas. And he directly went to complain to the Pandavas that how is it happening that someone has stolen from me the cows, and what are the kings doing? What is the ruler doing? Because that was the society, or that was the expectation from the king, that he helps everyone, all the citizens, to do their prescribed duties without any fear, without any suffering. He was supposed to give fearlessness to them. And that was the entire pastime is described, that how the Brahmana came there, Arjuna heard him, or Arjuna came to know that there is some problem, someone has stolen the cows from him. And there the pastime is described that his bow and arrow, it was inside his room. And that time in the room or inside the inner palatial hall, Draupadi was there, and it seems his elder brother Yudhishthir Maharaj was there. And they had a pact that if some person or any of their brothers is with Draupadi, no one else is supposed to enter the room. And if anyone enters, then he has to go on exile for 1 year, or he has to be out of the kingdom for 1 year. So even though Arjuna knew all that and Arjuna understood all that, but he thought, how can I give up my duty? My duty is, this Brahmana has come looking for fearlessness, now looking for protection. And this is more important. This duty of me being the king to protect this Brahmana is more important. And that's why even though that understanding amongst the brothers was there, still he gave up that, and he went inside the room, picked up his Gandiva, bow and arrow, went out and took care of this Brahmana, or helped the Brahmana get the cow back, and hunted the thief or killed the thief. And later on the pastime continues, Yudhishthir Maharaj tells him, you need not go to exile, you were just doing a duty. But he said, no, I have broken the rules, so I'll go for exile. But in this entire pastime, one thing we see was that how it was a duty, or in the past, even the duty of the ruler used to be such that they were supposed to maintain, or they were supposed to see that all citizens are engaged in their duties. And they were supposed to punish the citizens. And there are multiple other examples, like there was this king Vena, who was the son of Anga, who was creating so many difficulties or so many problems in the society. So he was a completely demoniac person who was creating so many problems and not allowing these different varnas to do their duties, especially the Brahmanas. He was not allowing them to be engaged in sacrifices. He was creating problems in the sacrifices. And in his rule, the thieves and rogues were becoming more and more rampant because the Varnashram system was not happening properly. And that is why later on we know how Brahmanas came together. They tried to guide the Kshatriya, they tried to guide the king. But when he refused to listen to them, when he refused to adhere to their request, they cursed him and he died. He was burnt. So that's how we see that how the society or the maintenance of this Varnashram was so important. And if it was not properly practiced by some demoniac kings, the entire society used to become topsy-turvy. But in those, when the rulers were pious, when the rulers were devotional, and they used to properly follow this, or make the entire citizens properly follow this, naturally there used to be prosperity. Naturally, the entire kingdom or entire citizens used to flourish like anything. And that's why Prabhupada writes in that purport, he says, to rule the mass of citizens in a state and keep them in a complete progressive order is not possible simply by passing laws every year in a legislative assembly. The Varnashrama dharma is essential in a good government. So Prabhupada says that just by making a government, just by having this democracy, rather, as we were hearing, Prabhupada glorifies monarchy. Even though because of the recent experiences we have seen, everyone is against monarchy. Because all the experiences which people have seen where the monarchs were just some tyrants, just some cunning people with no sense of piety or no sense of God, faith in God or something like that. They were just complete atheistic people. But when Prabhupada speaks about monarchy, he speaks about those rulers who are Vaishnavas, who are devotees of the Lord. If they rule the kingdom and they maintain this Varnashrama dharma, or they maintain this order, then the citizens would naturally progress. Even this word comes in Vishnu Puran, which speaks about the Varnashrama, which says, Varnashrama charavata purushena parapuman Vishnur aradhyate pantha nanya tattosha karana. Here he speaks about that, okay, we are speaking so much about Varnashrama, but what is the ultimate goal of this Varnashrama? We are speaking about the 4 Varnas, 4 Ashramas, but we also know to some extent this is also material. In a discussion between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Ramananda Rai, where Ramananda Rai was saying, or Ramananda Rai quoted this shloka and said, this is the highest thing, or this is the highest perfection of human society. And Mahaprabhu says, Eho Bhaiya, this is external, tell me something more. So we speak so much, we are speaking so much about this, but this was also rejected to some extent. But the point is, even when it comes to this Varnashrama dharma, of course, on the highest platform, Mahaprabhu rejected this, that this is also not the highest. But when it comes to organizing the society, this has been given very much relevance. And how it's, or what Prabhupada writes, he says, the beginning of real human civilization is observance of the institute of 4 Varnas and 4 Ashramas. That is the beginning of civilized life. Otherwise, it is not civilized life, it is crude uncivilized, where there is no Varnashrama, no division of society. So when we speak of practicing devotional service, we also speak that people have to come to the civilized standards, or they should have the civilized qualities that are there. And here he says the beginning of real human civilization is when people start following the Varnas and Ashramas. And of course, even in these Varnas and Ashramas, Vishnur aradhyate nanya tattosha karmana. That the focus is centered around, the entire Varnashrama is centered around Vishnu, or Supreme Lord Krishna. That through their prescribed duties, they try to satisfy the Supreme Lord, or through the prescribed duties that are given to them, the Lord becomes pleased. Because ultimately, this Varnashrama has also been given by the Supreme Lord. As Lord says in the Bhagavad Gita, Chatur Varnam Maya Shishtam Guna Karma Vibhagasa. That he is the one who has given this 4 Varnas based on the qualities and gunas of the person, or based on the activities of the person. And when a person performs that, person does those activities, then the Lord becomes pleased. And the goal of the Varnashrama, again, as it's mentioned in the shloka in Bhagavatam also, atapumbir didasheshta varnashrama vibhagasa swanushchitasta dharmasya samsiddhir haritoshanam. So he says all these things, or all these divisions that are there, the vibhagasas or the divisions in the society based on the varnashrama, ultimately all of this helps to please the Supreme Lord. When people do work according to their own occupation, according to their own duties, that pleases the Supreme Lord. Of course, when it comes to direct devotional service, we definitely know that pleases the Lord even more. But for the mass of people, general people who cannot take to that direct devotional service, then this is the way to please the Lord. If they follow their own prescribed duties, if they follow their own occupations, then that will please the Lord. And that was the concept which Prabhupada speaks here also about the Varnashrama, that the entire devotional life or entire this should be centered around Krishna, centered around the Supreme Lord. Because in general, it's seen that when it comes to all these things, or when it comes to the world nowadays, there is no concept of all these orders that are there. The brahmachari life, the young life, and a student has to be trained in these aspects of celibacy, sense control, mind control. Complete opposite is happening in the society. The senses, the mind becomes completely out of control because the young people have access to all the things, all the facilities. And Prabhupada speaks about the co-ed schools, that how people engage in all these different obnoxious or nefarious activities, and ultimately end up degrading their consciousness more and more. And even when it comes to the married life, the grahastha ashrama, which should ideally be the ashram centered around the Supreme Lord or worshipping of the Supreme Lord, that also most of the people are just grahamedis, engaged in that life, but they don't care about the Lord. They are not at all interested in worshipping the Lord. So you see, Narad Muni, he gives this teaching, as I was speaking the example of Narad Muni's teachings to Prashini Bharashya. So there also he gives a very nice analogy. He explains about these people who do not follow the tenets of Varnashrama Dharma, who are just bound or entangled in family life, and how they are suffering, or how they are just passing their life, not knowing the dangers awaiting them. He gives the example of a deer. So he speaks this nice shloka. He speaks, Shudram charam sumanasam sharane mithitva raktam shadangri ganasamasu lubda karnam agre virkan asu tripo vignaya yantam prishte mrigam megaya lubdaka bana bhinna. So this he is telling to Prachini Bharishat, he is telling an allegorical story where he is pointing about the activities of Prachini Bharishat himself. And there he is telling that he is telling to the king, just search out for a deer. Which deer he is talking about? Just search for a deer who is engaged in eating grass in a nice flower garden along with his wife. And then he says that deer is very much attached to his business, and he is enjoying the sweet singing of bumblebees in his garden. So here Narad Muni is giving a very nice analogy of a deer who is present in a flower garden, nicely eating the flowers in the garden along with his wife. And he's hearing the bumblebees or the sweet singing of the bumblebees, and he's feeling very pleasurable. Because we know deer's sense of hearing is very sharp or very strong. And he's comparing to the family life. So the deer in this example is compared to the living entities, or here Prachini Bharishat, who is just entangled in the family life, going around in the nice flower garden of the family life along with the wife, not understanding the goal of life, not understanding the purpose of life. And the sweet singing of the bumblebees is compared to the voice of the children, sweet or nice voice of the children. That how in the family life the person becomes completely entangled and forgets about the purpose of the life. Prabhupada speaks, or he writes in this purport, that how there are two things which entangles the person more and more. One is the wife, which cooks palatable dishes, very, very palatable dishes for the husband, and one is how she enjoys with him in seclusive places. Just because of the two things, the person becomes completely entangled and he forgets the purpose of life. And over and above that, when children come and their nice attractive voices, that entangles or that illusions a person even more and more. And that is what is compared to this deer. So further, the analogy is given that how the deer is engaged in all these activities in the garden. And then Narad Muni says, he is unaware that before him is a tiger. which is accustomed to living at the cost of another's flesh. And behind the deer is a hunter who is threatening to pierce him with sharp arrows. Thus, the deer's death is imminent. So, here he is giving a few other comparisons of this deer who is like the living entity, who is entangled in the family life along with his wife and the children. And now he's giving two more elements. He's talking about a tiger and he's talking about a hunter. So, what is this hunter compared to? Or what is this hunter who is waiting there and this person is unaware of this hunter who is waiting behind to pierce him with his sharp arrows? This hunter is compared to the superintendent of that, or Yamaraj, or the Yamdutas who are there. For a person who is engaged, who is a Grahamedi engaged in family life, he doesn't know that there is this Yamdutas who are just waiting for him that his time will finish and they'll snatch his soul and take away to give him immense sufferings, or to pierce him his body with sharp arrows. And that's how the person becomes completely forgetful of his imminent danger that is lying ahead of him. And he also says that behind the deer is this hunter and in front of the deer is the tiger. Who is this tiger, or what is this tiger compared to? This tiger is compared to the inevitable time that is there. The time which waits for no person and the time which keeps on passing. And as the time keeps on passing, the person keeps on becoming older and older. As this famous shloka from the Bhagavatam, it says, Ayur harati vai pumsam udyan astan chayanyaso tasyarte yashano nita uttam shloka vartaye. This shloka of the Bhagavatam says, Ayur harati vai pumsam, that both by the rising and the setting of the sun, udyan astan chayanyaso, that when the sun rises and the sun sets every single day, time keeps on passing away. With both by rising and by setting, the sun decreases the duration of life for everyone. Ayur harati vaim bhumsa. And this is what the Bhagavatam says, that this factor of time is like the sun's rising and setting, which takes on the life of every living entity. And the person doesn't understand this. Or the Grahamedi engaged in family life doesn't understand how he's losing his time. And this tiger in front of the deer, this represents this factor of time. Further on, this shloka says, Tatsyarte yashano nita uttam shloka vartaye. That of course there is one personality for whom this time doesn't create a problem. Or even though he also loses his duration of time, but he utilizes time in such a way that he goes or he becomes more and more fearless. He doesn't become fearful of this passing time. And who is that? Except one who utilizes the time by discussing the topics of the all good personality of God. That one who hears about the Lord, one who practices devotional service, even though he is also losing time. But he is losing time, or for him, Prabhupada writes in one of the purports, for him becoming old or getting some diseased or approaching that death, it's like a favorable condition for him, because he knows that after that he'll go to the eternal life. But for people in general, they are just losing their time, or they are just losing their life. So here Prabhupada, as we were discussing this shloka about Ayur Harati Vai Pumsa, that how the deer, the tiger is standing in front of him and tiger is compared to this factor of time. And Prabhupada explains very nicely that how any moment of time, even a second of time that is lost, or this is a shloka he quotes by Chanakya Pandit, that no matter how much he spends, or even if he gives millions of dollars, he cannot get back the time he lost, or even a second of time he loses. And that is what a person who is in this Graha Medhi ashram, who becomes completely entangled with his wife and children, forgets about all this. And in this analogy, he also explains that same position of this person who is Graha Medhi is always troubled. Even though he's illusioned, but it's not that he's satisfied in that. He says that the same woman who is very attractive in the beginning, but in the end very disturbing, and exactly like the flower, which is attractive in the beginning and detestable at the end. So he says, just like a flower, or just like a fresh flower which blooms nicely and which smells nicely or gives a very nice aroma, but same flower after some time it starts stinking, or same flower becomes so stinky that we don't even want to go near it. And same way he gives that analogy that just like that, this family life where the person becomes very, very illusioned in the beginning, and he forgets everything about spiritual life, the same thing becomes a cause of problem for him later on. And he explains further, he says, a young man accepts a young wife who is very beautiful in the beginning. But in due course of time, after giving birth to many children and becoming older and older, she demands many things from the husband to maintain the entire family. At such a time, the wife becomes detestable to the very man who accepted her in her younger days. So how he explains that these people, being illusioned, not understanding the purpose of life, they think that enjoyment is in this flower garden, or enjoyment is this in this family centered around the female or centered around women. But that same person, that same female who they become so much illusioned and so much attracted to in the beginning, that same female becomes a cause of problem for them. When later on, as it's described, when the female becomes older and older, she loses her beauty and she starts demanding so many things for her, for the children. That same becomes a cause of problem. And the person is ready to do anything. The person is ready to get money. If he's not able to earn money by proper means, then he's ready to steal, he's ready to beg, borrow, or whatever. In whatever ways he starts just to get money to satisfy the family. And that way the person becomes more and more disturbed. And that is why here he explains that according to Vedic civilization, it is imperative to give up the family at a certain age by force if necessary. Unfortunately, so-called followers of Vedic life do not give up their family even at the end of life, unless they are forced by death. And now he writes a very amazing line. He says, there should be a thorough overhauling of the social system in society, should revert to the Vedic principles, that is the 4 Varnas and the 4 Ashramas. So again in this purport, he speaks about that how there is a huge crisis or a huge need for the society to revert to these Vedic principles, or revert to these principles of 4 Varnas and 4 Ashramas, so that even at the time of death, the person doesn't stay stuck in family. The person gives up family life to practice devotional service. And you see, he uses the statement that it is imperative to give up the family at a certain stage by force if necessary. Prabhupada, out of his humility, sometimes he used to say like that when he was in his family life, his spiritual master was coming in his dreams. And he says that he literally forced me to get out of family life, or my spiritual master dragged me out of my family life. And that is what he's writing here, that it is imperative that at a certain stage, if not by will, someone should literally pull that person out of family life so that he can engage in devotional service, he then engage in practice of devotional life. Because if a person stays in that family life even till the point of death, then but naturally he'll take birth again as some degraded species and lose the valuable human chance or valuable chance of human life. And that's why he says that this Varna Ashrama becomes very, very important. And there in the purport he further writes, the inhabitants of Bharatvarsha are gradually becoming degraded mlechas and yavanas. How will they teach others? Therefore, this Krishna consciousness movement has been started not only for the inhabitants of Bharatvarsha, but for all the people of the world as announced by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So here he is speaking about that how these inhabitants of the Bharatvarsha, and as we discussed in the previous class also, when it comes to Mlechas and Yavnas, even now many people have this kind of thought process that these terms are used for foreigners or people of other faiths. But Prabhupada makes it very, very clear that anyone who doesn't follow Vedic principles, he is a Mlecha, he is a Yavna. Who doesn't understand the Vedic principles, who doesn't follow the Vedic principles, he is a Mlecha. It doesn't matter which faith he belongs to, Bharatvarsha gradually becoming degraded. And the responsibility that these people have to give this message to others, give this Krishna consciousness to others, it's not possible unless they themselves implement these teachings, they themselves apply these teachings. And then finally he says, there is still time, and if the inhabitants of Bharatvarsha take this movement of Krishna consciousness seriously, the entire world will be saved from gliding down to a hellish condition. So there he says that people take up to this mission seriously, people take up to this movement seriously, take to devotional service. And as Prabhupada desired, or as the Acharyas also desired, with time start implementing the concepts or start implementing the Varnashrama system also to whatever extent possible. Then there is a hope, first of all, they'll be able to practice the Krishna consciousness, they'll be able to make advancement and also help others come to the right path, or also help others or the entire Bharatvarsha or the entire world to actually take to this practice of devotional service. Otherwise, it's a very, very dangerous state. And one thing he says, or Prabhupada gives the example that how it is possible to teach others, how is it possible to give this message to others? He gives a very nice analogy. He says, as a highly potent drug injected intravenously acts as one on the whole body. So this example is given of an injection. Just like we know there's a difference between the medicine we take orally and the injection that is given. So the medicine we take orally, it takes some time. It goes inside the system, takes some time, gets digested, and then it acts on the whole body. But injection, as soon as a person takes injection, the injection goes in directly into the blood and directly gives the impact. Same way he takes to give this message of the Varnashrama Dhamma or the Krishna consciousness to others. Or he says, transcendental topics of the Lord injected through the ear by the pure devotee of the Lord can act very efficiently. He says this is like that injection that is there. The medicine takes time, but the injection acts immediately. Same way, when these topics are given to others and they give oral reception to these topics, or they hear these topics, then they act very efficiently. Or then the person's life is transformed. And that's why he focuses on this aspect of that, how first of all people have to implement these teachings in their own life. And when after implement these teachings in their own life, following these teachings, when they go to do paropkar, when they give these teachings to others, then it will act very, very efficiently. Then it will act just like that injection, which will immediately cause all the sinful or all the anarthas in the person, or all the vasanas in the person will automatically get purified when these teachings are given through the ear. And he gives another example for this aspect of association, that how this association works, or how a person who is practicing Krishna consciousness, who is following all the regulations, or who is on a very, very elevated platform, how is association can purify others. So he gives the example of pious activities. He says that, or he gives the example of charity, like when people do charity. So even the charity works to some extent in a material way. A person does charity to some person, he also gets something in return. Or the proper example that is given is, if a charity is given to some person who is not a Brahmana, or charity is given to some person who is of the other three ashramas, means Kshatriya, Vaishya and Shudra, but not a Brahmana, then it is given, the money is returned in the next life in the same proportion. He gets the money in the same proportion in the next life. Then it's given, if charity is given to a half-educated Brahmana, means not a completely educated Brahmana, but a half-educated Brahmana, then the money is returned double. Then what he gets is double in his next life. Then he says, if money is given in charity to a learned and fully qualified Brahmana, then the money is returned 100 and thousands of times. The person gets in return the 100 and 1,000 times of what he has given. And finally says, if the money is given to a Vedaparga, or one who has factually realized the path of the Vedas, it is returned by unlimited multiplication. So now this example is this a material example given of a person who is looking for some returns and he gives charity. So what is the best way he should give charity? Now Prabhupada gives a comparison to this. He says that just like there is a guarantee of money being returned if given in charity, regardless of the proportion, similarly a moment passed in the association of a pure devotee by hearing and chanting the transcendental message of the Lord is a perfect guarantee for eternal life or returning home back to Godhead. Just like when a person gives money, he has a guarantee that definitely either in this life or the next life the money will be returned to him based on the kind of charity he has done. Same way, if he gets the association of the devotees, or if people take this to themselves to give this association, give this transcendental message to others, the books to others, naturally if they get this or they hear this oral message, then there's a perfect guarantee for eternal life or returning home back to Godhead. Then such a person naturally will advance in Krishna consciousness, or naturally he'll pave the path back to Godhead. But for a person who is attached, or but for a person who is in the Brahmadi ashram completely illusion, for such a person, he'll keep on running after fruitive activities, keep on running after meager goals, and he will never be satisfied. And that's why this famous shloka which is quoted, that how if in the human form of life, if a person has got this chance to practice Krishna consciousness, in this shloka we quote often, Labdava Sudalabham idam bahu sambhava ante, Manushyam arthadam anityam api hadira. That this Sudalabha, or this human form of life which is obtained after many, many births, and this is the time where even though this life is temporary, or even though we are not important, but even in this anitya life, even in this temporary life, if a person takes to the highest benediction or highest Krishna consciousness, highest practice of Krishna consciousness, then nishreyasaya visha khalu sarvata swat. That vishaya or sense gratification which is available in any form of life, but if a person gives that up and takes to Krishna consciousness, then that is the fulfillment of human life, or that is the way he can attain the highest perfection. And that's why Prabhupada writes here, there's still time, and if the inhabitants of Bharat Varsha take this movement of Krishna consciousness seriously, the entire world will be saved from gliding down to a hellish condition. And finally says the Krishna consciousness movement follows the process of Pancharatrika Vidhi and that of Bhagavad Vidhi simultaneously, so that people can take advantage of the movement and make their life successful. So here he speaks that how in this movement we follow both the tenets, we follow the Pancharatrika Vidhi as well as the Bhagavad Vidhi. And sometimes this question is asked that why not just the Bhagavad Vidhi? Why not just chanting, reading and all those aspects? Why do we have to follow the Pancharatrika Vidhi? So Prabhupada explains in other purports that if a person just follows or just tries to imitate the acharyas or imitates the great devotees, like Haridas Thakur and all, and just try to do practice Bhagavad Vidhi or chanting of the holy names, since a conditioned soul is not on that platform, even if he tries to imitate, he'll just get disturbed. He'll be disturbed by the bodily needs of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. And that's why he'll end up becoming a sahaji, or he'll try to imitate these acharyas, but end up engaging in all the sinful activities. And that's why it's very, very important to follow both the vidhis simultaneously. Or as Prabhupada says, not imitating these acharyas rather than engaging in practical devotional service. Because at this present moment, in the conditioned stone, a person is disturbed by all these things, and he cannot artificially imitate these acharyas. And that's why he says that both the process of Pancharatrika Vidhi and Bhagavad Vidhi are simultaneously followed, so that people can take advantage of this movement and make their lives successful. Especially for the neophytes, as we were discussing in yesterday's lectures, also Prabhupada was telling that how deity worship or Pancharatrika Vidhi also becomes very, very important, so that a person can make gradual progress, a person can gradually be purified more and more, and get more and more essence, or get more and more faith in the process of Bhagavad Gita. Rather, in one of purports, he writes that deity worship in the form of temple worship is the most valuable benediction given by the Lord to the beginners. All neophytes must therefore engage in the worship of the Lord by keeping the Archa Vigraha at home or in the temple. So he says this is the most valuable, most highest benediction that is given. Now it's very surprising. Prabhupada speaks about, or everyone knows that how the Bhagavad Vidhi or the chanting of holy names is the highest process in this age. But still he speaks about the importance of deity worship, and he speaks that this is the most valuable benediction. Because at the present stage, we don't have that taste, or we are not on that platform to engage in the Bhagavad Vidhi throughout. And that's why deity worship becomes very, very important. Because by engaging in this Pancharatrika Vidhi, a person becomes gradually purified, and then he can make advancement. And of course, who is such a person who will take up to this process? As it's mentioned here, that as Prabhupada is writing, that people can take up to this process or should take up to this process of Krishna consciousness. So who are those ripe souls, or who are those people who can take up to this process? Prabhupada writes again in one of the purport. He says, those disgusted with material existence, being confused and frustrated by material enjoyment, and those people who are intelligent and interested in understanding the Supreme Lord. These are the kind of people who will take up to this process. As we know, when Prabhupada went to the West, he started preaching in the West. Of course, those people might not be interested in understanding the Supreme Lord, but one qualification they had was they were disgusted with the material enjoyment. Or they had completely given up, they were completely confused and frustrated by the material things that were there, and they were completely detached from that. And that was the reason they were able to take it up very seriously, or they were able to take up to this process very seriously. And that is why this is a very nice thing which Prabhupada explains, that who should this process be given to, and who can take up to this process? Those people who are just disgusted with this material enjoyment and they are looking for something higher, or those people who are interested in understanding the Supreme Lord, those are the people to them this message should be given, and they can take it up very nicely. But to those who are envious, who are atheistic, as we were hearing yesterday also, such people will just commit more offenses, and it will be more of nama aparadha if we give this message to those people, because they will neither have faith, and rather they'll end up spoiling the faith of the others also. And that's why preaching should be done to these kind of people, or those who are interested in understanding the Supreme Lord and who are completely disgusted with the material enjoyment, because such people are able to take up this message. And that way, finally says, those people who take up this message, they are the ones who can make their lives successful. So in this way, we understand, in this verse it's given, first we discussed about the importance of the Varnashrama, that how that is a very, very suitable platform for a person to engage in devotional service. And with time, if a person is trained in the system, he can also engage, he can also become completely dedicated at one point of time to fully practice or fully engage in time in practicing Krishna consciousness. But that training or that platform becomes very important. And how for those who have taken birth in this Bharatvarsha, especially in the tract of land, or he speaks about India. So it's a prerogative or a responsibility of people taking in birth in this place to first take these teachings very, very seriously, and then help others get these teachings, or then help these teachings to others. This way they can make their life successful, and they can also help others, or also help others make their life successful. So with this, I would like to pause here. Any questions, comments we can take? Or hi.
Thank you very much for this class. So in this it was mentioned that Narada Muni gave this knowledge to Savarni Manu. So was this a case of some other Manvantara? Because this Manvantara Manu is different.
And this looks like, because in this month is Vaivasvatapna. I've not done research, but definitely it will be different Manu only, because this Manvantara.
Question. You're mentioning about this Arya Samaj. The Arya Samaj people. So exactly this Arya Samaj people, because many people say that people who are staying here, they are coming from this Arya. What is exactly this Arya Samaj? What these people are, and how they are different?
No, Arya Samajis, they speak about, or one thing that is a major difference. They just focus more on the Vedas, Upanishads, and all those aspects, Shrutis basically. But they completely reject the other aspect, the Puranas. They don't have faith, or they don't believe in all these things. And then they are more focused, as Prabhupada also explains, on the sacrificial portion of the Vedas, basically Karma Kanda and all those aspects. When it comes to devotional service, these people are bewildered, and then, or these people are not able to take up. And we have so many societies or Arya Samaj societies We just focus on the Vedic aspects, on the Upanishads and other aspects, but they completely reject the Puranas. And that is like Ardha Kukut Nyaya, taking one part which is good for you, or which is pleasurable for you, but rejecting the other part. So that's why these people, they are pious people, no doubt. They follow the Vedic scriptures, but they don't understand the goal of life. They don't understand the highest perfection of life. Like,
how this term came into existence, because
it actually came out into existence from Aryans, or the ones who were civilized, ones who were devotees. That's what even in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna Prabhupada explains about the Aryans, or those who were devotees of the Lord, those who used to worship the Lord. But with time that got degraded. With time, these Arya Samajists, or these so-called people, they forgot the ultimate purpose of the Vedas, that they just engaged in all these activities. But actually, it came from the Aryans, or those who were devotees or intelligent people. Like,
At this point, when you were mentioning about Arjuna, so when that problem came, so you should not enter, but you entered as a duteous thing. So here he didn't consult any brahmanas or any ministers what to do at that time. And there are some cases like this also who take this as a duty, I have to do it. And later, the repercussions will come for myself, will face it. So that's really very good. When you see the Ambrish Maharaj case, so you took the guidance of the other brahmanas what to do. Sometimes in practically also in our lives, because of services or whatever. Sometimes you may take the initiative from myself, oh, this month I have to do right now. But someone else says something else. So at that time, should we take guidance? Or I can take my own decision and go forward. Whatever let me see. In practical sense, how to handle these situations.
practical sense, definitely we have to always take guidance, because we are conditioned souls, and naturally it's possible we might be thinking that is right for us, but then ultimately sometimes it may end up in blunders also. So naturally, taking guidance from superiors, or taking, not just taking guidance, asking from them that we are in such a state, or this is a situation where I feel this might be correct. We can definitely put forward our opinion, tell them that we feel this might be correct, but then we should take suggestions, and whatever is told to us, we should follow that. Because definitely we might think something is right, but it might not be right, or ultimately it might end up in blunders. So at least taking guidance is very important. But Arjuna, I didn't understand. Arjuna, what you said?
Yudhishthira and Draupadi were in the palace.
And so that time he didn't take guidance like that. Oh, that was, I think, that situation was just a very critical situation. He didn't even have time to approach anyone that time. So he just went inside the palace, because he had to save this Brahmana. He was thinking what to do. And for him at that time, there was no person to take guidance. There was no time to take guidance from anyone. Because that person was in trouble, and that thief was running away, and he was asking for help, and it was an immediate like crisis kind of situation. But for us, definitely, if we have that time, or we have the facility to take guidance, we should definitely take. Of course, at critical situations where there no one is available or no facility, then we have to take on our own behalf also. That is, yeah.
this Pancharatmika is like it's mood of goodness and weakness. How what is the process? Because this Bhagavad Gita are completely transparent.
Pancharatrika Vidhi is the different vidhis, or the different methods that are given by Narad Muni in this scripture which was discussed, Narad Pancharatra, which basically majorly talks about deity worship. That how deity worship. So whatever we perform, like the different numbering we follow, the different etiquettes we follow in deity worship, that has all been delineated in this Pancharatrika Vidhi. And definitely we know why this is important in this age, even though it is not the Yuga Dharma. But still it helps us for a purification, for cleansing the mind, or for purifying ourselves to focus on the form of the Lord. This Vidhi becomes very, very important. So naturally it will be in the mode of goodness only. It cannot be in the lower modes. And Bhagavad Gita, definitely it's above the modes, or when it comes to chanting and the holy names and all this. But because we are not in that state, or we are not able to access those things, so Pancharatrika Vidhi also becomes important.
But it is related to bhakti only, so it will be in the pure goodness only.
Pancharatrika Vidhi. Pancharatrika Vidhi.
All the bhakti angas, whatever we do, in pure goodness and transcendental. Like the 64 and the 40 also, so there are portion cases and cases. That is also what is the process.
No, actually, this question itself, that vidhi is in which mode, I don't think that is correct. Vidhi is just the process that is there. Now, when it comes to, we say chanting is in the mode of or transcendental, we cannot say that. That depends on who is performing that activity. If the person is not purified, how we cannot say that his chanting is transcendental. So, vidhi in which mode? The question, I think itself is not. So this is your question is, will this vidhi help us to go to transcendental mode?
Like if that is the case, this how this will be not declared as a Vaibhav, it is a person in the sense of
But he speaks, no, 64 angas are given. Out of that, the conversion 5 angas are given most priority. Out of that, also the most important anga is the chanting of the holy names. So definitely that gradation is also there. Vidhis are given because all these are very important for us to practice. But out of that, gradations are given. The 5 topmost angas, in that also deity worship is there. And then the topmost anga is chanting of the holy names. So like that, different gradations are given. Naturally, this will help us, or even the Pancharatika Vidhi will help us. That's why it has been recommended by the Acharyas to come to pure goodness. So this question exactly, that Vidhi is in which mode, I don't understand. But if we practice the Vidhi, we can come to, or it will help us to come to pure goodness. ठीक है, we'll pause here. ग्रंथा श्रीमद् भागवतम की, श्रील प्रभुपाद की.